All right, good evening. My name is Sarah Herbst. I'm an executive committee member of South Central Brooklyn United for Progress. Joining us this evening is Shahana Hanif, a candidate for City Council in the 39th District. We will begin with a 5-minute introduction by Ms. Hanif and then a approximately 10-minute question and answer period. When the interview concludes, we will post it on social media and YouTube, and we will vote on the endorsement on this district on Sunday, February 21st during our general meeting. All right, so if you can, please begin.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. I'm Shahana Hanif, running for City Council in the 39th District. I'm super happy to see familiar faces of neighborhood organizers I've worked with over the years. Thank you for all your commitment to Brooklyn and all our neighbors citywide. D39 and I go back 30 years. I just celebrated my 30th birthday earlier this month. I was born and raised in the heart of Little Bangladesh, Kensington. District 39 is where I attended school at PS 230, where my family still lives, and where I've committed to building community power block by block. My commitment to organizing, public service, and the fight for a multiracial democracy is personal. I'm a lupus survivor, and since my diagnosis at 17, I've been a part of the fights to create a feminist, livable city, one that radically prioritizes physical and mental health care for all. As a disabled youth, I witnessed our city's nebulous healthcare system and how young women of color like me and limited English proficient families like mine are forced to become advocates to demand adequate and transparent care. Growing up in Kensington, I witnessed the lack of enriching after-school programs, young women's spaces and youth centers, accessible public spaces, and support for survivors of gender-based violence. I witnessed our government abandon working class immigrant families, undocumented neighbors, youth, people with disabilities, and seniors. And after 9/11, I witnessed illegal surveillance in my community and upon Muslim families, community organizations, campuses, and mosques. All of this catalyzed a lifelong commitment to building community power. And for more than a decade, that's what I've been doing in and outside of the 39th District. My run for City Council is a continuation of my organizing locally, which includes years of organizing public housing residents to push back against privatization. I come to this work as a student who has traversed a divested school system in the district, and I've been working with parents, school leaders, and students for integration and equity. I come to this work as a grassroots activist and organizer committed to gender equity and building the power of women. At the peak of COVID, I paused all campaign activities, including fundraising, to coordinate a financial mutual aid, raising over $40,000 in survival funds for our undocumented neighbors entirely excluded from COVID relief payments. I'm familiar with the inner workings of City Council as the only woman of color at the director level in Councilmember Brad Lander's office. I led constituent services and grassroots initiatives like participatory budgeting that democratize our city's resources and got to work with neighbors district-wide. I opened up our Kensington Constituent Services mobile office so that our Bangladeshi neighbors and other immigrant neighbors could drop in regularly and receive vital services in Bangla. I ran a bi-weekly free legal clinic that was vital in protecting dozens of families in our district against deportations and ISIS attacks. It's through this work that I connected with Sarah. South Central Brooklyn United for Progress and several organizations helped share out thousands of translated ICE Know Your Rights flyers. I'm running to create an anti-racist city with the participatory government that puts people over profit and a budget rooted in care and decarceration, not harm. Our government must be rooted in language justice, invest in a gender equitable COVID recovery, with universal childcare, and commit to expanding the electorate and building a multiracial democracy that works for all of us. I could be the first woman elected to the city council in the 39th. This representation is super, super important as we fight against right-wing forces and uplift diverse voices in leadership. And I also want to include that I could be our city's first South Asian and Muslim woman elected to the city council. Do I have a minute or two to just say like who's in our coalition and the slate of endorsements?
So usually we save that more toward the end.
Okay.
So let's begin the question and answer
Sounds good.
portion of this interview. You can raise your hand on camera or you can use the raise hand emoji. I know Jazz and Matt already have questions. I have one as well.
Sure.
So my first question is in your interview, in your questionnaire, you had discussed that a large hospital system was sending coronavirus patients bills for the healthcare they had received during the height of the pandemic, which is obviously horrifying, and that they're the only hospital system in our city doing that in this time. I was wondering if you would sign on to endorse the New York Health Act, which would be a statewide Medicare for All program, and if so, we do have a pledge.
Emphatically, enthusiastically, yes. Healthcare is so personal to me, having navigated a system that is not patient-centric, not family care centric. And so I look forward to signing on and committing to just continuing to work with you all as we move towards universal healthcare in our state. And so yes, to signing on the New York Health Act. I think it's our only effort to again move towards universal healthcare access. I was so happy to see the healthcare question as the first question on the questionnaire. So I just like, thank you for making this one of your, I'm gonna assume that this is one of your biggest priorities as an organization. So thank you. And in the meantime, as we fight for the New York Health Act, which is gonna require partnering with our state partners, we've got to expand funding for NYC Care and all the other mechanisms we have to support all who are uninsured, and making sure that access is truly accessible, that healthcare needs are being met by people who are undocumented, who've been throughout the pandemic afraid to get vaccinated or to get tested for COVID, and not receiving vital information even because material is not content, or the information, the education is not available in multiple languages. And so we've had to rely on various community leaders, ethnic media, and our city could have been doing critical ethnic media outreach in order to get out the word about what the city is doing to protect all New Yorkers. And then one other piece, we've got to protect and preserve our hospital system. We can't have it be that hospitals are closing. Over the last decade, I think more than 20 hospitals have closed across New York City and have been defunded. And in the 39th at Presbyterian Methodist, the nurses union has been fighting to save the psychiatric beds in the hospital. This is a huge need. We are seeing folks who are abandoned, in need of mental health services. So we've got to do everything in our power to make sure that we're not closing down our most vital healthcare services. And then the other thing that I like to share about in terms of my personal story is that a couple years ago, I didn't realize that I was like pulled off from my health insurance, and I had raked up in medical debt. So the onus was entirely on me to need to pay this off. And if it wasn't for my community, I wouldn't have been able to pay off thousands of dollars worth of medical debt. And so we need a relief system that doesn't put the onus of paying for healthcare on patients, or that our healthcare system is entirely employer driven. And so I support, I will sign on to the pledge ASAP. So thank you
All right,
so much.
excellent. So Ellen has been kind enough to put the link to the
Super.
candidate pledge in the chat. And now I will call on Jess first because she lives in the district.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, Shahana. How are you tonight? You can hear me, yeah?
I can totally hear you. I'm
Okay,
doing well.
okay, good. um,
Good to hear
so
from you.
my name is Jessica Byrne. I am the president of Community Education Council District 22, which does not overlap with D39. However, we do have families in your district that I'm one of them. So we do have families that overlap in that district, although the way the lines are drawn, you don't have any of my schools in your district.
Okay.
However, I do have an education question for you, which will affect, which I hope will represent not necessarily the schools in my district, but the schools in my neighborhood, which is Kensington. So I'm wondering how you would use discretionary funds to help support our schools. I love the idea of participatory budgeting, but a lot of the times it doesn't funnel into our school system. And right now, when we talk about capital projects, especially, we are relying on funds from elected officials. So I'm wondering how you would use your discretionary budget to help support our local schools in Kensington.
Thank you so much. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is translation and interpretation equipment. We really need to make sure that these language accessible tools are available in our schools. I'd also like to see some funding going into any organizations doing work partnering with our schools to offer maybe an interpretation task force or a translation mechanism. Because right now, the conversations I've been having around school reopening is that it has entirely failed our multilingual learners and their families. I've had to be on phone calls with mostly very young daughters of Bangladeshi families asking me how to navigate the form to obtain a device to continue education. And this was early on in the pandemic. And so I really want to prioritize how we rethink utilizing grassroots community-based organizations, partnering with our schools, to develop a system that is adequately addressing the needs of our multilingual learners. And then the other priority for me are our students with disabilities. I know that the conversation around returning to school has been very, very much more challenging with families who have young folks with disabilities. And so again, a sort of partnership, because I know the PTA can't receive any discretionary funding. And you're absolutely right. Participatory budgeting has continued to pit schools against one another because we are essentially fighting for which school will receive maybe $5,000, maybe $2,000, because discretionary funding is not necessarily in the 25,000s and the 50,000s. So these are smaller dollars, but I think they could have impact if we're very intentional about how we're building with both the school community and then the community where the school is. And so bringing in the organizations to offer more enriching after school programs. I mean, one of my favorite youth-based organizations offering programming in my alma mater at PS230 is the South Asian Youth in Action, SAYA. And they're an organization that has recognized that the after-school programming being offered are not, the default ones are not meeting the needs of South Asian students at the school. And so SAYA receiving discretionary funding is absolutely critical for me. So like, what can we do to make sure that there's booster money for the groups that can help the communities that are not being looked after in the school community? I hope that answers your question. I mean, I could talk a little bit more about I've seen some brilliant projects through PB that I would love to really take to another level. I mean, first of all, I would like to take participatory budgeting to another level. I think community members deciding how our public budget gets spent is absolutely critical. So I would much rather that as council member, I don't take on the entire onus of deciding what 230 gets, what 179 gets, what 107 gets. I would like to see parents expanding parent co-governance, expanding student and youth power so that our communities help decide where this funding goes. And for that, the city council will need to do an overhaul of participatory budgeting. But as we talk about defunding and reinvesting, so divesting and investing, I think the community control component is absolutely critical. So I'd like to see more of that. I don't know what participatory budgeting will look like next year, but I am very confident that it will look very different because we've got to expand community control in this process.
All right, Matt, you may go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking with us tonight.
Of course.
Two quick questions. One, as you know, there are dozens of committees on the council. And if you're assigned to a committee that is not in line with your campaign priorities, how do you handle that? And the second question—
Can I answer that question first so that I don't forget?
Yeah, please, please.
So it's always when folks have multiple questions, I end up forgetting the second one.
No
and so I want to make sure I answer both of your questions. That's a really good question. And I feel like the experience of running for office encompasses that very experience, right? It's no longer being in an activist or like niche issue community. And so honestly, for me, as I've talked about healthcare, wanting it to be more patient-centric, I'm going to continue to lean on our people in our communities to help me navigate conversations and navigate priorities. So I think it's really important as council member to be an active listener, to really lean on what people on the ground are saying about these issues, and to lead together. I really believe in co-governance and want to see more transparency and accountability in our government structures. And so I anticipate, being on the receiving end of, just like disagreements and, we might not ideologically align, but I want to listen to folks. I think having one-on-one conversations are vital for my theory of change and how I look at organizing and advocacy and meeting people where they're at. So I want to continue doing that work. It's the work I've done on the ground here. And I hope to do that when I am hopefully I'm not on a committee which is not of my liking. But if I am, I will continue to just lean on my values and principles of building with communities on the ground.
Very good. And the other question, what is your view on the current status of the Brooklyn Democratic Party?
Oh, Matt. So, and that's like the reaction, because my experience in politics, I mean, as a young woman, as a woman of color, I've felt a sort of gatekeeping that I'm somehow not allowed to enter this very important space and structure. I don't want politics to be like that. And that's how the Brooklyn Democratic Party is right now. It is not accessible. And we're leading a reform movement to make sure that we're breaking down those gates so that we have reformer district leaders, we have more of us on the county committee. I'm on the county committee now. I've recruited a ton more South Asians and young people to be on the county committee. I think that work is critical as we do the work to fund organizations and to see who is in the spaces, in the local spaces within politics. So I've been very intentional about talking to our local district leaders and trying to see how we can incorporate more language access to this space as well. The registration, the party affiliation changes, that was a hot mess. I want to see us be more proactive about making sure we're getting out the word in getting folks to register with our party. I want to see that happen. And so I think there's more work ahead. I will continue to hold the party accountable to its messes. I mean, we saw a couple weeks ago the anti-Asian rhetoric by a leader in the party, and it took this person a long time to resign. But I love how we organized, how we mobilized in making sure that this person had to step down. So I think being very strong on our values is critical in this moment as we continue to build out a multiracial democracy.
All right,
Thanks.
Ellen, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, Shahana. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
So my question is kind of the flip side of a question that I've asked other people in this district and others. 39 is a big, diverse district. And so as someone coming from the south end of the district and being very active in that space, how would you be representing people in the north end of the district?
Thank you, Ellen. I love this question. I think it's an important one. And, you know, I'm excited to share that I've gotten to do work across the district, primarily through participatory budgeting and my time at Councilmember Brad Lander's office. And in fact, a couple years ago, when I was a baby tenant organizer, I was out here in Gowanus organizing with Fury and Fifth Avenue Committee to protect NYCHA from privatizing and from RAD. And so firstly, I just want to, you know, share, like, I've got the pulse on the ground, and our council member will need to have eyes everywhere, in the South, in the North, in the central neighborhoods. And the way I'm thinking about, like, what I would be doing more is thinking about, we're still in this lockdown. People are getting vaccinated. So I'm thinking right now, what will constituent services look like? And I want to have a constituent services office that is not just in Park Slope and not a third floor walk up that is inaccessible to so many of our neighbors, but mobile clinics across the district partnered with organizations. I want to meet people where they're at. And in doing that, I also want to make sure that one of the first things we do in our office is really just, oh, okay. I got this weird message about updated Zoom. Want to make sure that I have an updated list of all the ethnic media across the district, because Bangla isn't the only language out here. So which other ethnic media can I make sure that my office is communicating with? We've got to make sure that I have an updated list of all the, you know, the parent-teacher associations, school leaders, youth leaders. And then of course, like our principals, just our school community. I want to make sure that I know who's who in the district, just the updated versions. And I think it's going to be critical in a district like ours to continue doing the work we've already been doing. That's building across class lines. And I've seen that when I worked on this story about a domestic violence survivor, Miss Jahan, who needed to raise money for a survival fund so that she can afford an apartment and look for a job while she was housed. And this district came through, the 39th came through, helping me raise over $4,000 in less than a week so that she can transition from the shelter system to an apartment. And so that's the kind of work I want to continue doing. And of course, you know, I mentioned that language justice will be central. I want to see our office equipped with the language access in who's on staff and be able to speak, because I mean, I got Bangla covered, right? But want to make sure that we have Spanish, Yiddish, potentially Urdu, and talent directly from the district that we're hiring locally. And that these folks are trained in de-escalation and our social workers. And I think that's possible. We've got to be intentional about who we are hiring, because the political landscape, or like the city council, as I've seen in the last couple of years of working in it, I was brought on first in City Council Member Brad Lander's office as a community liaison. And that's usually the position I've seen many Black and Brown folks hired as. And so who's legislative director and who's dealing with budget is critical for me as we think about the pipeline of who is in our government and who is governing and who is at the policy table. So these are some of the transformations I would like to work on in my time in the city council.
All right, do we have any further questions at this time? All right, since Zoom is giving us another exactly 10 minutes, Shahana, if you are interested in talking about your endorsements and path to victory,
Sure.
we can do that.
And I also received a message from Joy. I just want to copy Joy's number down so that I do not miss it. But feel free to share out my information to the club. Super accessible if folks have any more questions. Our coalition is big and it's only growing. I'm super, super proud of how far we've come. We've been endorsed by State Senator Jessica Ramos, New York Communities for Change, Muslim Democratic Club of New York, Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats, Lambda Independent Democrats, New York Immigration Coalition, Action, Run for Something, Triage, Women of Color for Progress, Citizen Action of New York, and two really big ones are coming out tomorrow, which I'm super excited about, but I can't share here. And we're building a momentum rooted in the communities in the 39th district. We've been hosting weekend phone banking. I have phone banking shifts every day this week. We are calling voters and getting the pulse on what folks know, because as we know, Twitterverse is not the entire district. And so we were really just honing in on how we bring more people into what we've already built. Last night, we hosted an event on what is feminist governance and what do I mean when I talk about a feminist city council, and over 70 people showed up to that. And it was successful because it wasn't just me talking. It was our all women policy team who have been building and working with cultivating I'm really proud of the platforms we put out. I've been working with Sabina, May, and Melanie for over a year now. So the commitment of the team has been, long-term. And so last night, to see so many people I know from the district be at our event, it's just a show. It's a showing. It's a gesture showing just how beautiful the movement we're building in District 39 is. And so I'm excited to continue building. I'm excited for the next leg of thinking about what ranked choice voting will look like in the district. And I'm hoping that, I know the Board of Election and the city at large is not doing well with getting out the word about ranked choice voting. And I know the onus is going to fall on candidates. And so I've been personally just thinking about, like, how do we translate talking about ranked choice voting in other languages, like folks who came up with the reform or the initial language didn't think about us. And so although I'm super proud of this reform and I'm excited that, it's taking place when I'm running for office, because I think it's super intimidating to run for office. And I've heard a lot of, challenging things to push me off to the side. And so RCV has really held me in the race. And I want to make sure more and more folks know that RCV is here. But I also want to push for materials available in other languages so that the voter education reaches everybody in New York.
All right, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you to our members who showed up as well. We will be hosting this video on YouTube and Facebook, as well as our website. We are going to have a watch party for the many interviews we've had with other D39 candidates this Saturday. We will vote in a non-recorded meeting this Sunday on if we will endorse in this race, and if so, who we will be endorsing.
Sorry.
Thank you so much again for your time.
We will not be voting in the meeting this Sunday. We will be discussing in a non-recording
Yes.
meeting this Sunday our views on it. The vote is online.
Okay.
It's ranked choice.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That is true.
Thank you all so much. Take care.
All right,
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you.